The concept of surrealism was created to break societal boundaries and question cultural conditioning. The Surrealist movement began in 1924 and persisted in affecting major parts of society's everyday life such as literature, philosophy, politics, and art. Salvador Dali was one of the greatest creative minds of his time. Unlike the majority of artists involved in this historical movement, Dali was believed to be a fascist, despite his unusual work that went against a societal structure, therefore putting into question whether he belonged in the Surrealist circle or not. Despite the debate, it is undeniable that Salvador Dali played a major role in the Surrealism movement through his contributions of symbolism, cinematography, and perception of dreams. To start off, Salvador Dali was illustrious when it came to symbolism in his art. He used many different objects to represent ulterior meanings. One of the most recurring symbols was the egg, which can be found in several paintings such as Geopoliticus Child, Watching the Birth of the New Man, Fried Eggs on the Plate Without the Plate, L'Aurora, and many more. Symbolism became crucial to Surrealism in many ways during the movement. For starters, it gave the artists a method to convey hidden meanings in their art. With the concept of Surrealism being in development, there were many artists entertaining the possibility of what art could be. There were no longer rules nor standards that structuralized art into the anatomy of a person or a bed of roses. It was up to the artists to decide what they wanted to paint, which brought the possibility to paint with their hearts and not their eyes. In effect, the sudden need to paint what one felt, desired, and feared could only be fulfilled through hidden meanings, thus came symbolism. Surrealists were firm believers in the simple fact that art should be personal and speak to each individual on such a level. When given a picture of a garden, there is no room for interpretation. It is simply a garden. However, when given an image that is something out of the ordinary and would typically be deemed as strange, this gave viewers the chance to perceive it to their liking. It suddenly became their choice what they wanted to see and how they wanted to interpret it. This caused art to become much more personal as well, as each individual could see what they wanted to see and relate it to their own lives. Symbolism also helped convey certain ideas, thoughts, and emotions that were too complex for standard imagery. As Surrealism was a method to express inner thoughts and feelings, this led to some complications as the human mind is a complex concept to grasp and cannot simply be defined by a basic picture. Abstract thinking, however, gave art a new perspective and a new way to convey messages. It was no longer a matter of attempting to express one's mindset using common images with standardized meanings. As the blending of abstract and surreal images made an appearance in the art world, this made it so artists now had the ability to create their own messages freely without the restraints of society. Dali learned and perfected the method of arranging symbols on a canvas to not only portray emotions but to tell stories without words, yet another essential building block of the Surrealist movement. Secondly, Salvador Dali's work was not limited to paint. In fact, he worked in many cinematic productions, one of his most famous being Le Chien Andalou. At the time when surrealistic art was becoming increasingly popular, cinematography was adopting many surrealist concepts. This helped revolutionize the new form of art. As the popularity of cinema increased, the more attention the movement received. It broke boundaries in many ways, starting with the irregular narrative structure of the films. Typically, films followed a standardized narrative structure that was deemed as appropriate and typical for that time period, as there was appropriate and typical art for that time period. Surrealism reaching the cinematic culture gave new possibilities to how movies would begin to look. The animation changed as well as plot structure, hence a new era of films came to the forefront. Though it may be a century since the movement commenced, Surrealism continued to make groundbreaking promises to today's day and age. Many popular names, such as Tim Burton's, use Surrealism in their films to create a vivid, unique, as well as memorable signature style. The style is continuously being recreated in new and exciting ways across endless amounts of platforms in modern society. This serves to prove that Dali's influence did not end in his era, but was prolonged throughout history, right into modern day and age. Most importantly, putting surrealistic art into movies form allowed the artist's dreams as well as visions to be portrayed more clearly. The motion picture allowed for depth, motion, and exposure to be added to the original art, which caused it to become more realistic, and eventually embody the dreams of the creator. It brought art to a whole new level. As viewers, along with artists, were now watching the creations come alive in front of their eyes, Salvador Dali's cooperation with animation studios enlightened society with the possibilities that came with bringing such vivacity to the art world. In fact, Salvador Dali would often fall asleep with a fork on his head and a plate in his lap. When he would begin having dreams, his head would fall forward and the fork would clatter onto the plate, waking him up in the process. Being woken up in the middle of his dreams permitted him to remember what he was seeing in time to bring it to life through his art. This is an example as to how it would have looked in one of Salvador Dali's dreams. Dali often experienced his dreams on a 360 perspective, allowing him to truly get the opportunity to live in his art. Lastly, dreams are believed to be a path to the subconscious mind. The images formed in the human mind with nothing but spare thoughts and emotions can often come out as bizarre as well as eccentric. However, they often speak loudly to who we are as well as how we perceive things. Salvador Dali adopted dream analysis into his work after learning about Sigmund Freud's theory. This soon became the primary focus of his work. As Dali often found the majority of his inspiration came through in his dreams, this technique was used in many of his works, including The Persistence of Memory, his most commonly known piece. This played not only a major role in Dali's art, but in the Surrealism movement as a whole. Dreams permitted the artist to spring from the restraints of logic and reason, as there was no longer any need for such ideologies. Dreams have no sequence or patterns. They are a way of interpreting day-to-day situations. Therefore, they can present themselves in all forms. When artists such as Dali began recreating what they saw in their heads, the art became more abstract, as well as surreal in comparison to the artists who would create from sight and could therefore only paint what was realistic as well as possible. Painting from dreams also allowed for stronger inspiration to flow through the minds of their artists. Typically, artists in that day and age were accustomed to thinking in a black and white manner, which meant painting what they saw as they saw it. This can be seen in broad varieties of artists such as Edward Hopper, Claude Monet, and many others, who all painted in realism. Realism art, though considered beautiful by many, is often deemed as uninspired by others due to the lack of emotion and room for interpretation. The manner in which Dali was able to cultivate imagery from his mind broadened the horizons from what art was to what it could be. As the art became more eccentric, the ideas regarding the possibilities of art expanded immensely, thus creating a new pillar in Surrealism. Another way in which incorporating dreams assisted in revolutionizing art was that it helped artists express themselves more openly, as dreams were believed to be a method to dive into one's inner consciousness. That led to an increased number of artists using Surrealism to portray their innermost fears, desires, as well as fantasies. This opened up a huge range of possibilities to all artists, as this became the contemporary way to express oneself. There is no limit to the stories as well as messages that could be conveyed and pondered with art. Even when words ceased to be enough to bear the weight of human thought, art persisted and therefore has continued to be one of the main methods used for self-expression to this day. Salvador Dali revolutionized dream analysis in art. Dreams then went on to play a vital role in the development of the Surrealism movement and continues to impact it to this day. In conclusion, Salvador Dali was a crucial aspect of the Surrealism movement. Through the use of symbolism, cinematography, and dreams, he was able to reconstruct what art meant to a society plagued by war and stagnation. Through this, he not only inspired the 20th century with his artistic ways and abnormal thinking, but many generations to follow. Thank you.